My boyfriend stared toward the party room. Maybe I'm overthinking this. He laughed once. Maybe it's stupid. Then his expression hardened. But it feels weird. Your father is trying to upstage me. My dad had worn a cream-colored suit to his own 65th birthday dinner. I said calmly, I'll talk to him. Then I drove my boyfriend home, turned around, and went back to celebrate with my dad. The breakup text I sent from the party was the cleanest thing I had written in 14 months. My name is Maren Voss. I was 29 when I finally understood that some relationships do not end because of cheating, screaming, or one dramatic betrayal everyone can easily point to. Sometimes they end because one person says something so absurd, so small and ugly and revealing, that every excuse you have ever made for them suddenly collapses at once. My father turned 65 on a Saturday evening. It should have been a simple family dinner, a private room at a restaurant he loved, about 30 people, his sister, a few cousins, old neighbors, my younger sister, and friends who had known him since before my mother got sick. My mother had been gone for 6 years. After she died, my father became quieter in a way that scared me at first. He was never a loud man, but grief seemed to fold him inward. He still showed up for everyone. He still fixed my sink without being asked, still drove my sister to appointments when her car broke down, still remembered birthdays and carried groceries upstairs like he was proving to himself he was useful. But he stopped asking for anything. He stopped buying new clothes. He stopped choosing restaurants. He stopped letting anyone make a fuss over him. So when he told us he wanted a real birthday dinner that year, my sister and I treated it like something precious. For once, he was choosing himself. He chose the restaurant. He chose the menu. He even bought himself a new suit, which might not sound like a big deal unless you knew my dad. This was a man who wore the same navy jacket to every wedding, graduation, funeral, and holiday dinner because, as he liked to say, it still buttons, doesn't it? 2 days before the party, he sent me a photo from the tailor's mirror, a cream-colored suit, soft, warm, not bright white. A little bold for him, maybe, but elegant. The jacket sat perfectly on his shoulders. He looked handsome in a way that made my throat tighten, because I had not seen him look proud of himself in years. I texted back, "You look amazing, Dad." He replied, "Too much?" I wrote, "Not even close." I sent a thumbs up emoji, then 5 minutes later another message. "Your mom would have laughed at me first, then told me to buy the shoes too." I stared at that line longer than I expected. My mother would have done exactly that. She would have teased him, adjusted his collar, told him he looked like he was about to open a jazz club, then kissed his cheek in front of everyone just to embarrass him. For a moment, I could almost see her standing beside him in the tailor's mirror. That was why the dinner mattered. It was not just a birthday. It was the first time my father had allowed joy to touch something that used to belong to both of them. My boyfriend, Adrian, had been with me for 14 months. He had met my father several times, and I thought things between them were fine. Not close, exactly, but civil. My father always made an effort. He asked Adrian about work. He remembered how he took his coffee. He invited him to family dinners, even when I could tell he was tired. Adrian always said the right things in front of me. "Your dad's a good guy. Your family is close. I like that you still care about him." But sometimes, after we left, his tone changed just enough to make me uncomfortable. "Your dad asks a lot of questions. Your sister watches me like she's taking notes. Your family acts like they get a vote in your life." At the time, I explained it away. Adrian came from a family where everyone loved each other from a distance. Birthdays were texts, holidays were short calls, problems were handled privately or not at all. I told myself he simply wasn't used to a family that hugged in parking lots and argued over who got the last piece of cake. I told myself love meant giving someone room to adjust. It embarrasses me now how often I translated his discomfort into depth. That night, we arrived at the restaurant a little before the party started. My dad was already near the entrance, greeting guests with both hands, looking nervous and pleased at the same time. The cream-colored suit caught the warm light from the chandeliers, and for a second he looked almost younger. Not because the suit made him look like someone else, but because it reminded me of who he had been before grief taught him to take up less space. I walked over and hugged him. "Happy birthday, Dad," I whispered. He held me tightly, then pulled back and tugged at his sleeve. "Too flashy? You look perfect." He glanced down, smiling in that shy way he had when he was trying not to show how much something meant to him. Your mother would have had a comment. She would have made 3. He laughed, and the sound hit me harder than I expected. I had missed that laugh. Adrian stood beside me, silent. My father turned to him anyway. Adrian, glad you made it. Adrian gave him a thin smile. Of course. I noticed the smile, but only barely. The room was filling. My aunt was already waving from across the restaurant, and my sister was trying to position everyone for photos before the appetizers came out. I was too busy watching my dad enjoy himself to study the look on my boyfriend's face. We moved into the private room. There were candles on the tables, old photos placed near the cake, and a framed picture of my mother tucked beside the flowers. Because my sister and I both knew Dad would want her there without having to say it. People hugged him, complimented the suit, told him he looked sharp. Every time someone said it, he acted embarrassed, but his smile kept giving him away. For the first half hour, everything felt exactly how it was supposed to feel. Then Adrian touched my wrist. It was not rough enough to make a scene, but it was firm enough that my body understood before my mind did. "We need to talk," he said under his breath. For a moment, I genuinely thought he had to be joking. "What's wrong?" "Now, Marin." I followed him toward the hallway near the restrooms, still hearing my father laugh behind me. That laugh followed me like a warning I did not yet understand. The second we were away from the table, Adrian turned on me. "Are you serious?" I blinked. "About what?" "Your father." "My father what?" He looked toward the room, his mouth tight with offense. "Look at what he's wearing." I waited for more, because surely that could not be the whole complaint. "A suit?" I said. "It's white. It's cream," I answered slowly. "And it's his birthday." Adrian stared at me as if I had deliberately missed something obvious. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Act like you don't see it." For a second, I thought he was joking. Not because his face looked playful, but because my brain needed that to be the explanation. There had to be a version of this conversation where he laughed, shook his head, and admitted he was being ridiculous. I did not. "He's trying to upstage me," Adrian said. The sentence made no sense in the air between us. I heard every word, but they refused to arrange themselves into a reasonable thought. "Upstage you?" I repeated. "At his own birthday party?" "He knows cream is basically white." I stared at him. "And?" "And white is my color." I almost laughed, then stopped myself because his expression was deadly serious. "Adrian, I wore that white blazer to your cousin's wedding last month. Everyone complimented me. He remembers." I looked back toward the private room. My dad was standing near the photo table, listening to one of his old friends with his hands in his pockets, smiling like a man who still wasn't entirely comfortable being celebrated. Then I looked back at my boyfriend, who somehow saw that same man as a rival. "My father bought a cream-colored suit for his 65th birthday because you wore a white blazer to a wedding? You're making me sound ridiculous." "You are making yourself sound ridiculous." His eyes sharpened. "See, this is exactly what I mean. You always defend him." A couple passed behind us. My aunt glanced over from the doorway, her smile fading when she saw my face. I lowered my voice because I could feel the celebration on the other side of the wall, fragile and warm, and I suddenly wanted to protect it from him. "This is Dad's birthday. People are looking at him because they came here for him. He always has to be the center of attention when your family is around. Hai is the center of attention tonight because this is literally his celebration." Adrian looked wounded, as though I had betrayed him by refusing to bend reality into the shape he needed. "You don't understand," he said. "He competes with me." "For what?" "For you." The words settled into me with a cold weight. I had spent months ignoring the little signs because they were easy to dismiss individually. A sigh when my father called, a joke about how often I visited, a complaint that my sister knew too much about my life. None of it had looked serious enough to name, but standing in that hallway, listening to my boyfriend accuse a widower of weaponizing a birthday suit to steal attention from him, I felt those moments gather behind me like witnesses. This was not about fabric. It was not about cream versus white. It was not even about the suit. It was about my father daring to feel handsome in a room full of people who loved him. It was about a man who had buried his wife, raised 2 daughters through grief, and spent 6 years making himself smaller so no one else had to feel uncomfortable around his sadness. And now, on the one night he allowed himself to be seen, my boyfriend could not stand it. I took one slow breath. "Okay," I said. Adrian's face softened slightly. He mistook my quiet for agreement. "I knew you'd understand. I hear that you're upset." "I am. And I don't want this to escalate at my father's party." He nodded quickly. "Exactly. So go talk to him. I'm going to take you home first." His expression changed. "What?" "You're too upset to stay here." "You're sending me away?" "I'm taking you somewhere you can calm down." He stared at me, offended but not suspicious yet. That was the strangest part. He still thought I was on his side. He thought I was removing him from the room so I could go back inside and correct my father for dressing too well at his own birthday dinner. Fine, he snapped, but you need to tell him that was inappropriate. I looked at him for one long second. Then I said, sure, and I walked him out. The drive to Adrian's apartment took about 15 minutes. It felt closer to an hour. The city lights slid across the windshield while he talked almost the entire way. At first, I thought he might calm down once we left the restaurant. Sometimes distance changes the shape of an argument. Sometimes people hear themselves differently when they're no longer standing inside the thing upsetting them. Instead, Adrian became more convinced. Did you see how everyone reacted when he walked in? I kept my eyes on the road. They reacted because it's his birthday. That's not what I mean. I didn't answer. He shifted in his seat. He knew exactly what he was doing. I glanced at him briefly. Buying a suit? Getting attention. The certainty in his voice unsettled me more than the accusation itself. A person having a bad moment usually sounds uncertain afterward. Embarrassed, defensive, even confused. Adrian sounded like a prosecutor presenting evidence, like he had been collecting reasons to resent my father for months and finally believed he had found proof. As he continued talking, old memories began surfacing whether I wanted them to or not. My father's weekly phone calls, the way Adrian always sighed before I answered, the way he complained whenever I spent a Saturday helping Dad with something around the house, the way he rolled his eyes whenever family stories lasted longer than 5 minutes. At the time, each moment had seemed harmless enough. Relationships are complicated. Families are complicated. People get irritated. That was what I told myself. But listening to him explain why a 65-year-old widower was apparently competing with him for attention, I started hearing those memories differently. Not as isolated moments, as a pattern. The realization was uncomfortable because it forced me to confront something I didn't want to admit. Part of me had known for a while. I had just been protecting the relationship from the truth. You know what the real problem is? Adrian said. I already knew I wasn't going to like the answer. What? Your family treats him like he's some kind of saint. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. My mother died. I know. 6 years ago. I know. Then why are you acting offended that people wanted to celebrate him tonight? He let out a frustrated breath. See, you always twist things. The irony hit me so hard I almost laughed. For 14 months, I had been twisting reality into shapes that made his behavior easier to accept. Now that I was finally looking at things directly, suddenly I was the one twisting things. The rest of the drive passed in tense silence. When we reached his apartment building, something interesting happened. He relaxed. Not completely, but enough for me to notice. His shoulders loosened. His expression softened. The anger that had consumed him all evening seemed to fade. For a moment, I couldn't understand why. Then it hit me. I thought he had won. He genuinely believed I was about to return to the restaurant and confront my father. The thought made my stomach turn. Han unbuckled his seatbelt and leaned toward me. Thank you. I looked at him. The sentence hung in the air between us, absurd and completely serious at the same time. For what? Handling this. The words hung in the air. Handling this. Not his behavior. Not the argument. Not the accusation. My father. That was still the problem in his mind. The obstacle. The source of conflict. The person who needed to be corrected. A strange feeling settled over me then. Not anger. Not sadness. Something quieter. The feeling you get when the last piece of a puzzle finally clicks into place and reveals a picture you wish you hadn't completed. So many things suddenly made sense. The complaints. The jealousy. The irritation. The constant need to be the most important person in every room. The competition had never existed in my father's mind. Only Adrian's. He kissed my cheek before opening the car door. I knew you'd eventually see it my way. Then he stepped out and walked toward his building. I watched him disappear through the entrance. For a long moment, I stayed exactly where I was. The dashboard clock glowed softly in the darkness. My phone buzzed with messages from relatives asking where we were. Inside the restaurant, my father was probably standing beside his birthday cake. Maybe listening to one of his old friends tell the same story for the 10th time. Maybe laughing. Maybe finally enjoying himself without worrying about anyone else. And instead of feeling torn between two people I loved, I felt something unexpected. Relief. The feeling arrived so suddenly it almost startled me. I wasn't relieved because the relationship was ending. I was relieved because I no longer had to pretend I didn't see what was right in front of me. I started the car and drove back. The parking lot was fuller now. Music drifted through the restaurant entrance. The warm smell of food met me before I even reached the private room. The atmosphere inside felt completely different from the conversation I had just left. The room felt lighter than it had all evening. People were laughing, arguing over desserts, and talking over one another the way families do when nobody is trying to impress anyone. Nobody looked offended. Nobody looked threatened. Nobody seemed concerned about the color of a suit. The only person who had managed to turn the evening into a competition was gone. My father was standing near the cake table when I found him. I was laughing at something my uncle had said. His tie was slightly crooked. One sleeve had ridden up a little. The cream-colored jacket looked less formal now than it had earlier. More lived in. More him. For a moment, I simply watched. Then a painful thought crossed my mind. This man had spent 6 years rebuilding a life he never wanted to rebuild. I had learned how to cook meals for one, how to sleep alone, how to walk past my mother's side of the closet every morning. I had carried grief quietly because he didn't want his daughters carrying it too. And tonight, on the one evening that was supposed to belong entirely to him, my boyfriend had somehow found a way to make it about himself. I pulled out my phone, opened my conversation with Adrian, stared at the screen. 14 months of memories flashed through my mind. Vacations, late-night conversations, stupid inside jokes, plans we had made without realizing they would never happen. Future conversations that would never happen. For a moment, I hesitated, not because I doubted the decision, because endings are sad even when they're necessary. Then I started typing. I've been thinking about what happened tonight. Accusing my father of trying to upstage you at his own 65th birthday party because of the color of his suit isn't something I can overlook. The more I think about it, the more I realize this isn't actually about tonight. It's about how you see my family. It's about the resentment you've carried toward my father. And it's about the fact that you expected me to support it. I can't. This relationship isn't working anymore. I genuinely wish you the best. But we're done. I read the message twice, then pressed send. The reply appeared almost immediately. Marin, then another. What are you doing? Then another. Are you serious? I locked my phone before I could read anything else. For the first time all evening, I wasn't interested in the argument that was coming. I was interested in being present. My father spotted me from across the room and waved. There you are. I smiled. Sorry, traffic. He laughed. You missed your uncle telling the same story for the 4th time. I'll survive. A few minutes later, he handed me a plate with a ridiculous amount of birthday cake on it. I sat beside him, listened to old stories, looked through photographs, watched him smile, and somewhere between the cake and the laughter and the terrible dancing, my aunt insisted everyone participate in, I realized something that should have been obvious all along. Love isn't supposed to make you choose between the people who have always shown up for you and the person asking you to shrink your world. By the time I got home that night, my phone contained 23 missed calls, and Adrian was only getting started. By the time I unlocked my apartment door, it was a little after 10. The celebration had lasted longer than expected. That alone felt like a victory. For years, every family gathering seemed to end with my father quietly cleaning up while everyone else went home. This time, people lingered. They told stories. They ordered extra desserts. They laughed so loudly the restaurant manager came by twice just to make sure everything was okay. For one night, my father wasn't the widower people worried about. I was simply the birthday guy, and he deserved every second of it. I kicked off my shoes, set my purse on the counter, and finally looked at my phone. The screen lit up immediately. 23 missed calls, 41 text messages, 6 voicemails. I stared at the notifications for several seconds. The escalation was so dramatic it almost felt absurd. The first messages had been confused. Marin, what is this? Call me. The next wave sounded angry. You're overreacting. This is insane. You're seriously ending 14 months over one argument? Then came bargaining. Let's talk tomorrow. Please don't do this. You're emotional right now. And finally, desperation. I love you. Please call me. I don't understand what's happening. I sat on the edge of my bed, scrolling through them. What surprised me wasn't the volume. It was the complete absence of accountability. Not one message said, I was wrong. Not one message said, your father didn't deserve that. Not one message acknowledged what had actually happened. The entire conversation revolved around Adrian's feelings. His confusion, his hurt, his anger, his loss. The pattern was suddenly impossible to miss. For months, every conflict had somehow ended in the same place. His emotions became the main event. Everyone else's became supporting characters. I set the phone down and rubbed my eyes. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that usually made me feel lonely. Tonight it felt different. For the first time in a very long time, my thoughts weren't occupied by figuring out how to manage someone else's reactions. I wasn't rehearsing an apology. I wasn't preparing for an argument. I wasn't trying to translate unreasonable behavior into something understandable. I was simply tired. and strangely at peace. That peace lasted exactly 13 minutes. The building buzzer sounded. Once, then again, then a third time. I didn't even need to check. I already knew. I walked to the intercom. Adrian. His voice arrived immediately. Marin, please. I closed my eyes. Of course. The text hadn't worked. The calls hadn't worked. So now he was physically here. We're not doing this tonight. Please let me come up. No. Marin. No. Silence. Then another buzz. Then another. I leaned my forehead against the wall. Part of me wanted to ignore him. The other part knew he wasn't leaving. Eventually, I grabbed my keys and headed downstairs. The moment I stepped outside the building entrance, I saw him standing beneath the streetlight. His eyes were red. His hair was messy. His expression looked somewhere between devastated and offended, as though he couldn't decide whether he had been abandoned or insulted. The second he saw me, he stepped forward. You can't end a relationship through a text. No hello. No apology. No acknowledgement of the birthday party. Just outrage. I folded my arms. Apparently I can. Marin, seriously. I am serious. His jaw tightened. We had one argument. I stared at him. No. Yes, we did. No, Adrian. I shook my head slowly. What happened tonight wasn't one argument. His frustration visibly increased. Then what was it? I thought about my father laughing beside his birthday cake, about him nervously adjusting his tie, about how happy he looked when people complimented the suit. Then I looked back at Adrian. It was the first time you stopped hiding what you actually think. His face changed, only slightly, but enough, because people react differently when they're misunderstood. They react very differently when someone accidentally describes them accurately. I was upset. You accused my father of competing with you. I wasn't thinking clearly. You asked me to tell a 65-year-old man that his birthday suit was inappropriate because people were paying attention to him. You keep saying it like that, because that's exactly what happened. It sounds worse when you put it that way. I laughed once, a short disbelieving sound. Adrian, it sounds worse because it is worse. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Cars passed behind him. A siren echoed somewhere in the distance. The city continued moving around us as if none of this mattered. Maybe it didn't. Maybe the world is full of breakups that feel enormous to the people living them and completely invisible to everyone else. Finally, Adrian looked down. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. I was insecure. The statement hung between us, waiting, expecting forgiveness. I nodded. Okay. His eyes lifted hopefully. Okay. People get insecure. They do. You've been insecure before, of course. So why am I being punished for it? The question hit me harder than I expected, because part of me genuinely wanted to answer it carefully. Part of me still cared about him, still remembered the good days, still remembered why I'd fallen in love with him. But every time I tried to reach for those memories, another image got in the way. My father standing in that cream-colored suit, smiling, happy, proud, and Adrian looking at that happiness like it was an attack. I shook my head. No one is punishing you. Then what is this? I met his eyes. This is me paying attention. That seemed to confuse him, so I continued. For months I've been explaining things away. His expression tightened. The comments about my family. The complaints whenever I spent time with my dad. Marin. The way you always acted irritated when he called. His eyes flickered. Small, almost invisible. But I saw it. Recognition. Because he remembered those moments too. You always choose them. The words escaped before he could stop them. And suddenly everything became quiet. Not around us. Inside me. Because there it was. The real argument. The one that had been hiding underneath everything else. I repeated the sentence slowly. You always choose them. His eyes widened slightly. He realized immediately what he'd revealed. That's not what I meant. It sounds exactly like what you meant. I just mean... No, I shook my head. You don't get to rewrite it now. For a moment he looked trapped. Like someone who had accidentally opened a door he couldn't close again. My father isn't competing with you. I know that. Do you? Silence. I care about him because he's my father. I know. He lost his wife. I know. He spent years putting our lives back together. I know. Then why does it bother you when people love him? That question landed. Hard. Because for the first time all night, Adrian had absolutely nothing to say. And in that silence, I finally understood something. This had never been about my father. Not really. It was about attention, importance, priority. If someone else received love, Adrian experienced it as loss. And no relationship survives that kind of thinking forever. Eventually, everyone becomes competition. My family, my friends, my career, anyone capable of drawing focus away from him. The realization made me unexpectedly sad. Not heartbroken, not devastated, just sad. Because I suddenly understood that the relationship hadn't ended tonight. Tonight was simply when I stopped pretending it was healthy. I think you should go home, I said gently. His eyes widened. That's it? What did you expect? I expected you to fight for us. The irony nearly made me laugh. I had spent 14 months fighting for us, making excuses, giving second chances, explaining things that shouldn't have needed explanation. The only person who hadn't been fighting for the relationship was the man standing in front of me. I'm tired, Adrian. His face crumpled. For a second, I saw genuine pain there. Real pain. And that was the hardest part. Because people can hurt you and still be hurting themselves. Those things are not mutually exclusive. Eventually, he nodded. Not agreement. Defeat. Then he turned and started walking away. Halfway down the sidewalk, he stopped. Marin, I waited. If I apologized to your father, would it matter? The question arrived too late. An apology given after consequences isn't always an apology. Sometimes it's a negotiation, and I think he knew that. No. His shoulders sank. Then he kept walking. I watched until he disappeared around the corner. At the time, I thought that conversation was the hardest part of the breakup. I was wrong. Because over the next few days, I was going to discover that Adrian's problem with my father had been visible to everyone except me. The next morning, I expected to wake up feeling miserable. 14 months is a long time to share your life with someone. Even when a breakup is necessary, there's usually a period where your brain keeps reaching for habits that no longer exist. You wake up expecting a text. You see something funny and instinctively think about sending it. You hear a song and remember a conversation. Instead, I woke up feeling strangely clear. The sadness was there, but underneath it was something stronger. Relief. The kind of relief that only arrives after you stop carrying a weight you didn't realize had become heavy. I went to work, answered emails, sat through meetings, pretended everything was normal. But throughout the day, memories kept resurfacing. Not dramatic moments, small ones. The kind you dismiss because they don't seem important enough to confront. The way Adrian sighed every time my father called. The way he complained after family dinners. The way he always found something wrong with gatherings that everyone else enjoyed. The way he acted as if spending time with my dad was some kind of obligation instead of a privilege. Individually, those moments never seemed serious. Together, they formed a pattern that suddenly looked impossible to ignore. By Sunday afternoon, another message arrived. Not from Adrian, from his best friend. The message was long, extremely long. According to him, Adrian was devastated. According to him, Adrian hadn't slept. According to him, Adrian couldn't understand how a good relationship had ended over a misunderstanding. That word appeared several times. Misunderstanding. I read the entire message. Then I replied with a single sentence. Your friend accused my 65-year-old father of trying to steal attention from him at his own birthday party because of the color of his suit. 5 minutes later, another message arrived. Just one line. Wait, that's what happened? I stared at the screen. Interesting. Apparently, Adrian hadn't been telling people the full story. That became a recurring theme. Monday brought something even more surprising. His mother called. I almost ignored it. Curiosity won. We had always gotten along reasonably well. She was polite, reserved, and seemed permanently exhausted by things she never said out loud. Marin, hi. There was a pause. The careful kind. The kind people take when they know they're walking into uncomfortable territory. I hope I'm not bothering you. It's okay. Another pause. Adrian told me there was a disagreement at your father's birthday. A disagreement. Interesting wording. I leaned back in my chair. There was. Silence. Then she asked quietly, what exactly happened? The question surprised me. Most parents arrive ready to defend their children. She sounded like someone trying to understand. So I told her. Everything. The cream-colored suit. The accusation. The competition comments. The demand that I confront my father. The drive home. The breakup text. The entire story. By the time I finished, the line had gone completely silent. Not defensive silence. Thinking silence. Finally, she spoke. That sounds extreme. I blinked. Honestly, I hadn't expected that response. Neither had Adrian, apparently. Because less than 10 minutes later, my phone exploded. Why are you talking to my mother? What did you tell her? Why is she upset? I stared at the messages. The irony was incredible. I hadn't called her. She had called me. For the first time, I began wondering how many situations in Adrian's life depended on people hearing edited versions of events. I didn't answer. Tuesday evening brought the conversation that changed everything. My younger sister called. The moment I picked up, she said, okay, I need to tell you something. That opening alone made me sit up straighter. What? She hesitated. You promise not to get mad? No, she laughed. Fair. Then her voice became serious. Marin, Adrian was rude to Dad. I frowned. At the birthday party? No. A pause. All year. The room suddenly felt quieter. What do you mean? She exhaled slowly. I mean all year. I didn't say anything. She continued. I didn't want to tell you because I knew how much you cared about him. My stomach tightened. But everybody noticed. Everybody. Not me. Everybody. For a second, I felt embarrassed that everyone else had seen it before I did. I wasn't openly rude, she said. Then what was he? The kind of rude that makes you doubt yourself afterward. I knew exactly what she meant. The comments that sound harmless until you replay them later. The jokes with just enough bite to leave a mark. The dismissiveness that's easy to deny if someone calls it out. He interrupted Dad constantly. My jaw tightened. He acted bored whenever Dad told stories. Another knot formed in my stomach. He'd get irritated whenever conversations focused on Dad for too long. I closed my eyes, because suddenly old memories started rearranging themselves. Dad pausing in the middle of stories. Dad changing subjects unexpectedly. Dad becoming quieter after family dinners. At the time, I thought he was tired. Now I wasn't so sure. Why didn't anyone tell me? The question came out softer than I intended. My sister answered immediately. Because you looked happy. That hurt more than I expected. Because she was right. My family had tolerated behavior they didn't like because they thought the relationship mattered to me. They had protected my happiness at the expense of their own comfort. I leaned back in my chair. A wave of guilt rolled through me. Not because Adrian had behaved badly. Because I had spent so much time explaining away behavior that should have concerned me. My sister's voice softened. Dad noticed too. I swallowed. What did he say? Nothing. Of course. That answer sounded exactly like him. He just kept saying Adrian would settle in eventually. I looked toward my apartment window. The city lights blurred beyond the glass. That sounded exactly like my father. Patient, optimistic, always willing to give people one more chance, even when they probably hadn't earned it. The conversation lasted almost an hour, and by the time it ended, the pieces weren't falling into place anymore. They were already there. I was just looking at them honestly for the first time. The birthday party wasn't the problem. The suit wasn't the problem. The suit had simply exposed a problem that already existed. Months of resentment, months of competition, months of quiet jealousy disguised as irritation. The cream-colored suit hadn't created any of it. It had merely revealed it. And once I saw it clearly, I couldn't unsee it. Unfortunately, neither could Adrian. Because by the end of that week, instead of moving on, apologizing, or accepting the breakup, I decided to show up somewhere he had absolutely no business being. My workplace. By Friday, I thought things were finally settling down. The calls had become less frequent. The texts had slowed. The emotional chaos that followed the breakup seemed to be losing momentum. I wasn't happy about how everything ended, but I was beginning to accept it. Life was starting to feel normal again. Then my receptionist called my desk. Marin? I looked up from my computer. Yeah? There's someone here asking for you. I frowned. Who? There was a brief pause. Then she said, Your boyfriend. My stomach immediately dropped. Not because I was surprised, because I knew exactly who it was, and because Adrian knew perfectly well he wasn't my boyfriend anymore. For several seconds, I just stared at the phone. Then I thanked her and hung up. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt strangely long. Every floor gave me another few seconds to wonder what he thought this would accomplish. An apology? A grand romantic gesture? Some dramatic movie scene where I suddenly changed my mind? Whatever it was, I already knew it wasn't going to work. The lobby doors opened, and there he was, standing beside the reception desk, holding flowers, looking exhausted. The receptionist was pretending not to watch, which somehow made the situation even more embarrassing. The second Adrian saw me, his face brightened, as though my appearance confirmed some hope he had been carrying all week. Marin, what are you doing here? His smile faded. You weren't answering my calls. That's because I didn't want to talk. I needed to see you. No. I shook my head. You wanted to see me. His expression tightened immediately. The distinction annoyed him. Marin, can we stop doing this? Doing what? This. He gestured vaguely between us. The silence. The ignoring me. Pretending 14 months didn't matter. Several employees walked through the lobby behind me. I could feel curious eyes drifting toward us. Exactly what I didn't want. I lowered my voice. This is my workplace. I know. Then why are you here? Because you left me no choice. The sentence landed with surprising force. Because you left me no choice. As though respecting my decision had never been an option. As though boundaries only mattered when they belonged to him. I took a slow breath. We're not having this conversation in the lobby. Relief flashed across his face. I mistook my statement for progress. It wasn't. I simply didn't want my coworkers becoming part of the breakup. We walked outside. The autumn air was cool. Cars moved steadily along the street. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Adrian launched into what was obviously a prepared speech. I don't understand how we got here. I almost smiled, because I understood exactly how we got there. The difference was that I had finally stopped lying to myself about it. We got here because you accused my father of competing with you. His jaw tightened. That's not fair. It happened. I was emotional. You were honest. The words slipped out before I could stop them. His expression immediately changed. What is that supposed to mean? It means I don't think the birthday party created those feelings. I held his gaze. I think it exposed them. Silence. Not long. Just long enough. Long enough to tell me I was close to the truth. Eventually, he shook his head. You make me sound insane. No. I folded my arms. The situation makes you sound insane. His eyes narrowed. There you go again. What? Making me look ridiculous. The frustrating thing was that I wasn't making him look ridiculous. Reality was doing that all by itself. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he changed tactics. His voice softened. My feelings mattered too. I almost sighed, because I recognized the move immediately. For months, every difficult conversation eventually arrived at the same destination. His feelings, his insecurities, his fears, his frustrations. The focus always shifted back to him. A year earlier, it would have worked. Now I could see the pattern happening in real time. Your feelings do matter. His expression brightened slightly. Then I continued. They just don't excuse your behavior. The hope disappeared instantly. You always make me the bad guy. I laughed softly. The predictability of it was almost impressive. Every disagreement, every conflict, every moment accountability entered the conversation. The same script, the same redirection. The same attempt to turn criticism into victimhood. And once I recognized it, I couldn't stop recognizing it. No, Adrian. I looked directly at him. You became the bad guy when you looked at a man celebrating his 65th birthday and somehow made yourself the victim. His face hardened. For a moment, I thought he would argue. Instead, something more revealing happened. He looked angry. Not hurt, not devastated. Angry. As though the breakup itself wasn't the worst part. As though losing control of the story bothered him more than losing the relationship. You know what? He said. What? Your family never liked me. I almost rolled my eyes. Because this felt familiar too. Whenever evidence became impossible to deny, suddenly there was a conspiracy. My family tolerated more than you realize. What does that mean? I studied him for a moment. Then I made a decision. My sister told me everything. The reaction was immediate. A flicker. Tiny. Barely noticeable. But unmistakable. Panic. Gone a second later. What did she say? Enough. She's exaggerating. Interesting. Not confusion. Not curiosity. Not what are you talking about? Straight to discrediting the source. The reaction of someone who already knows the source is telling the truth. My sister stayed quiet for over a year. So if she wanted to sabotage our relationship, she had plenty of opportunities. He looked away. I continued. She stayed quiet because she thought I was happy. That one landed. I could tell. Because for the first time since the conversation started, Adrian had absolutely nothing to say. The silence stretched. Then he asked quietly, So that's it? I nodded. That's it. You really won't reconsider? No. His eyes searched my face, looking for hesitation, looking for doubt, looking for the version of me that would still make excuses for him. That version was gone, because this wasn't a decision I was making in a parking lot. It was a decision I made the moment I watched my father smiling beside his birthday cake while Adrian complained about his suit. Eventually, Adrian nodded. Not acceptance. Recognition. Recognition that he wasn't going to win. Without another word, he turned and walked away. I stood there until he disappeared around the corner. Then I went back inside. My manager looked up when I returned. You okay? I considered the question. For the first time in a long time, the answer felt simple. Yeah. And surprisingly, I meant it. I genuinely believed that would be the end. I was wrong. Because 2 days later, Adrian made one final move. And instead of coming to me, I went directly to my father. 2 days after Adrian showed up at my office, my phone rang while I was making dinner. The screen said Dad. I smiled automatically and answered. Hey. His voice sounded normal, maybe a little puzzled. Honey, I got a message from Adrian. I stopped stirring the pasta sauce. Of course he did. After the breakup text. After the late night visit. After the workplace confrontation. Apparently the next step was my father. What kind of message? A long one. I leaned against the counter. And? He apologized. That surprised me. For approximately 2 seconds. Then Dad continued. Well, sort of. There it was. The part I'd been expecting. What does sort of mean? I was quiet for a moment. The way people get when they're trying to be fair. He said there were misunderstandings. I closed my eyes. Of course. Not. I was wrong. Not. I treated you unfairly. Not. I accused you of something ridiculous. Misunderstandings. A wonderfully convenient word. It allows people to avoid responsibility while sounding reasonable. What else? He said he hopes we can all move forward. I laughed softly. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. What he really wants is for you to convince me to take him back. A pause. Then my father sighed. That was my impression too. I smiled despite myself. My father had never been dramatic, never manipulative, never the type to interfere in my relationships. If anything, he usually stayed too far out of them. What did you tell him? The truth. And what was that? That you're an adult. I waited. And adults make their own decisions. Classic dad. No speech. No lecture. No attempt to punish anyone. Just a boundary. Simple. Clean. Final. Then he surprised me. Marin? Yeah? I'm relieved. I went silent, because my father rarely spoke negatively about anyone, especially someone I had cared about. What do you mean? There was a pause. I think you finally saw something I hoped wasn't true. The words landed harder than I expected. Not because they were cruel, because they weren't. They were sad. The kind of sadness that comes from watching someone you love learn a painful lesson. You knew? He laughed softly. A little? A little? Marin, I'm 65, not stupid. That made me laugh. A real laugh. The first one I'd had all week. Then he continued. I kept hoping he'd settle in. The sentence broke my heart, because it sounded exactly like him. Patient, forgiving, always willing to believe people could become better versions of themselves, even when they kept proving otherwise. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question that had been bothering me since my conversation with my sister. Did he really bother you? Another pause. Longer this time. Sometimes. The honesty surprised me. Why didn't you say anything? Because you were happy. The answer hit me like a punch. My sister had said the same thing. Now my father was saying it too. They had tolerated discomfort because they thought I had found something worth protecting. And somehow that made me feel worse than if they'd hated him. The conversation ended shortly afterward. I finished dinner, watched television, tried to move forward. Then, 3 days later, a handwritten letter arrived. 3 pages, front and back. Carefully written, carefully organized, carefully emotional. I sat at my kitchen table and read every word. The central message was simple. He loved me. He missed me. He had started therapy. He was working on himself. He wanted another chance. Then I reached the section that caught my attention. According to Adrian, the real problem wasn't the birthday party. It wasn't the suit. It wasn't the argument. The real problem, he claimed, was that he'd always felt excluded from my family. I put the letter down. Read that section again. Excluded. Interesting word. Because it sounded sympathetic, reasonable, almost persuasive, until you compared it to reality. He'd attended every family dinner, every holiday, every birthday, every invitation. My father welcomed him. My sister tolerated him. My relatives included him. Nobody excluded Adrian. The more I thought about it, the more obvious the issue became. I didn't want inclusion. I wanted priority. There's a difference. Inclusion means joining the circle. Priority means becoming the center of it. And if someone spends enough time confusing those two things, every healthy relationship starts feeling unfair to them. The letter never received a response. Not out of anger. There simply wasn't anything left to say. Then something happened that answered the final question I still had. One of our mutual friends called me. She had attended the birthday dinner. After a few minutes of conversation, she hesitated. Then she said, "There's something I've been meaning to tell you." Immediately I paid attention. What? The night of the party. My stomach tightened. What about it? She sighed. I heard Adrian say something before the argument. I waited. He saw your dad's suit and said, "Of course he did. He always needs attention." For a moment I couldn't speak, because that single sentence solved the last remaining mystery. The birthday confrontation hadn't been spontaneous. The resentment already existed. The suit didn't create it. The suit exposed it. Everything that happened afterward was simply the natural result of feelings he'd been carrying for months. After that conversation, the remaining pieces fell into place quickly. His best friend stopped defending him. The calls stopped. The messages stopped. The silence became permanent. And honestly, I was grateful. A few weeks later, my sister took me out for drinks. Halfway through the evening, she raised her glass. To freedom. I laughed. That's dramatic. Not really. Then she spent the next hour telling me stories she'd never shared before. Small moments, dismissive comments, passive-aggressive jokes, tiny acts of disrespect that seemed harmless individually, but looked very different once you lined them up together. By the end of the night, I understood something that had taken me far too long to learn. The breakup didn't happen because of a cream-colored suit. The breakup happened because the suit revealed everything else. A month later, my father invited me over for dinner. When he opened the front door, I immediately started laughing. He looked down at himself. What? You wore it again. The cream-colored suit jacket. The same one. He grinned. Of course I did. Then he straightened the lapel with obvious satisfaction. I paid good money for this thing. The last time I'd seen him smile like that, my mother had still been alive. I laughed harder. The sound echoed through the house. For a second, I could almost imagine my mother laughing too. My father looked good, not younger, not transformed, just happy, comfortable in his own skin, comfortable taking up space again. And somehow that felt more meaningful than anything else. That night we ate dinner, talked for hours, shared dessert, looked through old photographs. At one point, my father found a picture of himself and my mother from years earlier. He stared at it for a moment, then smiled. A quiet smile, the kind that comes from love surviving grief. When I left that evening, I stood in the driveway for a moment, watching him wave from the front door. The cream-colored jacket caught the porch light, and suddenly I understood why that stupid suit had mattered so much. Not because it was expensive, not because it was stylish, because it represented something my father hadn't allowed himself in years. Joy. The willingness to be seen again. The willingness to step back into life instead of standing beside it. My boyfriend had looked at that moment and seen competition. I looked at it and saw healing. That was the difference between us. For a long time, I thought the story was about choosing my father over my boyfriend. It wasn't. My father never asked me to choose. The choice only existed because Adrian created it. He looked at a man celebrating his 65th birthday, surrounded by people who loved him, and somehow decided there wasn't enough room for both of them in the same spotlight. In the end, that belief destroyed the relationship far more effectively than any breakup text ever could. My father bought a cream-colored suit to celebrate turning 65. Adrian saw a rival. I saw a man finally allowing himself to be happy again. That difference told me everything I needed to know.